Hi, my name is Daniel Isley, and this is my informative speech that I'm giving for public speaking class with SPC College. Here are my note cards that I have. I have 1, 2, 3, and 4. And my live member audience. And he's filming the speech. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So now I'm going to give my speech. Your vote matters, said every American enthusiast ever. But what if I told you that your vote in Florida doesn't matter and is essentially wasted? Let me bring you back to the year 2000 in the election Bush versus Gore. In that election, every single state submitted their votes on time and calculated them properly. However, Florida did not. Interesting enough, it was down to Florida on who would decide who would win that election. But it wasn't that simple. In Florida's precincts, in multiple of Florida precincts, there was an issue in malfunctioning machines to where they could not count the votes properly, which automatically issued a recount. And then another recount. And then another recount. And then it went on until the Florida Supreme Court said, we've had enough, too much riots are happening in Florida, too many problems and frustrations are being expressed, we need to stop it. So they decided that what the original count was would be who would win the election. And all the other votes that were supposed to be recounted didn't matter. So that's not the first time, and it's not going to be the last time that Florida has a problem with the election system. With that being said, and the right to vote being the #1 most civically used action, I believe that it's important to inform you on why your vote is unimportant in Florida. So, for those who vote, or for those of you who will vote in the future, I would like to inform you of the 3 biggest problems in Florida's election systems, which is fair districts, or voter participation, ballot counting, fair districts, and how we can solve each of those issues. So for the first one, voter participation. What that generally is a statistic or percentage. It's the percentage of people who actually show up to the polls and cast their vote. So for example, in the 2012 general election, 43.3% of Floridians actually went to vote. In the primaries of that same year, only 18% of those in Florida voted. But why is that a problem? The reason why that's a problem is because 60% of Americans say that they don't like who's in office, and they don't like how the government system is running. But guess what? We're the people responsible for that because we put them in office. So, what problems affect the voter participation rate? Well, according to the Worst Election Offenders organization, they have stated that there's a few problems that indicate the decreasing percentage of voter participation, and one being lines. Lines have been significantly too long in some Florida precincts. They've been anywhere from 3 to 7 hours long to wait. Also, in Florida, we've had trouble in accommodating to those with disabilities or with those who have a heavy schedule that can't show up on voting days. Also, our registration regulations have shown recent problems, and many people are having a really tough time being able to register. So, how can we fix these problems? According to the SPC database that I researched, an article titled Election Reform stated that we could possibly use technology or a mailing system from our house that we could use to vote from so we don't have to go to the polls. Or we could change the voting days. Or we could shorten the ballots so they're more efficient to count and the times you go into vote is shorter and the lines are shorter. Or lastly, repeal and amend the laws with regulation of registering to vote. So beyond voter participation, another problem is ballot counting. And what that simply is counting the votes. And the problems in Florida that we've seen recently in history is many recounts. Not only in the 2000 election has there been a lot of were there recounts, but in previous years before that and even now. Also, we've had trouble counting absentee ballots. And also, according to the Division of Elections, that we've, in recent years, have had problems in validating ballots, which means that in the 2012 general election, there was around 200,000 ballots that were just thrown away because the machines improperly calculated them, which is a problem because in that same year, it was 70,000 votes that determined who would win the electoral votes in Florida. Also, we are below average in multiple criteria points for ballot counting, according to the rest of the 49 states of America. So how can we fix this? We can have a shorter and more explained ballots, so those ballots that are easier to cast your vote in. We can have a better system to vote, or we could maybe have more workers, so there's more people taking the time to count these votes, so the process is quicker. Lastly, when one thinks of an election system, what they think of most in electing a candidate is fairness. But in Florida, it's not that fair, and that's because of districts. A problem in Florida that has been in recent years is a problem called gerrymandering, which is when the politicians that are currently in office draw the districts in such a way that makes the candidate that runs in that district favorable by a specific party. For example, in this picture, you'll see Florida's 5th district. If you see here that 70% of the votes were Democrat because it was drawn in such a way that any candidate that ran from that district would win if they were Democrat. So how can we solve that problem? Well, easily. We take the job of the politicians that are already in office of redrawing those districts and put them in the hands of somebody that can be trusted. So maybe design a committee of people who are knowledgeable about districting and redistricting and drawing them who aren't politicians and that can draw them fairly. So, in conclusion, you are now aware of the 3 biggest problems that the state of Florida holds when it comes to elections. The purpose of this is to know. The purpose of this knowledge is to illustrate that when these problems can be fixed, we as a state can be more engaged and in tune with the decisions and current dilemmas, including our government and country. So, knowing this information now, hopefully we can pass it on to more people and allow people to be more aware of the elections, of the problems in elections in Florida. And one way we can simply fix some of these problems is start asking ourselves, should we vote or not vote? Because if our voice isn't heard, then we're not making a difference. So now Caleb's going to come up. Oh, questions, that's right. Q&A questions. Is there any questions about the topic of the speech?
Yeah, I have a question. So you mentioned gerrymandering in your speech. Does Florida have, because you said such an issue, does Florida have like a past history of having a lot of problems with that? Or is it something that really has become more modern times? Does that make sense?
Yeah, actually, a good question. There's been, actually, Florida has 2 of the most gender-married, gerrymandered districts in the entire nation. One being District 5, the one that I showed you guys, and another one down in, I think, Miami. And also, recently of 2015, the Florida Supreme Court had just notified that our state legislature needs to redraw our districts because, as you can see, that's not okay. So, if that answers your question. Any other questions? It's okay, you can think about it.
I got a question.
Yeah.
What do you propose they do to fix it?
Fix gerrymandering?
Yes.
Okay, I mean, what I explained in my speech would be to design a committee. So right now, currently, politicians or the House and Senate currently draws our districts, which, if you think about it, they're the people that are getting voted by those districts. So if we have people that draw the districts that aren't our current politicians, then it could be more fair because they don't have to be like, oh, I want to get voted back in next term or what have you. So if you have a committee of people who are knowledgeable about elections, so like the FEC, then it could be a little bit more fairly done.
Would it be nonpartisan?
Yes. And you couldn't create nonpartisan, but what you could do is create the panel to be in a way that favors half Republicans and half Democrat.
Okay.
And even have some independents in there. Any other questions? And by the way, I got that information of gerrymandering from an All About Redistricting organization. And it's actually a really good source, so if you want to check it out, just search that on Google.
Another another good example of gerrymandering is the rep that we have in this area. She lives in South Tampa and represents us in South Hillsborough. Now, how does she even know what's going on here?
Yeah, she doesn't.
She probably never even drives down here.
Yeah.
So
That's how you know when there's a problem, is when they don't even know about your constituents, you know what I mean, and they're in office because of something that's unfair.
Yeah.
Did you have a question?
Is the CHAD system still used in Florida for voting?
CHAD system, so of my knowledge, there might be few precincts that count dippable CHADs or what have you. There was recent laws after that election had occurred that solved that issue, maybe not entirely, but mostly in precincts or in ballot counting facilities in Florida, they usually just count them electronically.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about. I don't believe that the ballots are counted by hand now. They're all counted electronically.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Some though aren't able to afford it as much, but at least that's what I was reading. That some, due to the demographics in the area or what have you, that some aren't able to afford the technology and have to actually count them through that old system or by hand or however they need to get it done.
So are we using the same technology as other states at this point?
Generally, yeah. I mean, we all across the board for each state, we use the same type of counting system. But like I said, it depends on the area that you live in. That truly determines on how you're actually counting the votes. So that's up to your precinct. Your precinct has certain jurisdiction over that. So, all right. So, Caleb, would you like to come over and do the critique session?
Absolutely. So we are just going to go, first off, we're going to go over the correct things that Mr. Isley did in his speech. So does anybody have a point they'd like to commemorate him for doing?
Well, I think he had good eye contact with the audience. He was looking at us the overwhelming majority of the time. So I think that's
Definitely agree. Yes.
I think he did a good job of planning out what he was going to discuss in his speech, giving us kind of roadmap of what to expect.
Yes, the introduction was great, powerful, strong, kept us listening and very interested in what you had to say next.
Yeah, he spelled out the problems, the issues well, and the resolutions to those problems well.
Absolutely.
It's very clear.
You also did a really great job with using the Bush and Gore presidential election, because that really gave us a little bit of context behind it, and because that was recent and it is a lot of say in the news today of being able to spell that out for us. So that was a great job. Any other last minute things?
I think he does a good job with projecting his voice.
Yeah.
It's easy to hear him. It's easy to understand what he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
Shows a lot of passion
Yeah.
in his speech.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely agree. Any more last minute?
You gave a preview of the main points.
Yes.
Before you did it, that was good.
Okay, is there anything that Mr. Isley can improve on in the future?
The swaying, that would be the only thing I would think.
Nervous movement.
Yeah, your
Yeah.
nervous movement. And if you were in front of a podium or something,
Yeah.
you may not have that, because then your hands may be on something to where you wouldn't have that.
Definitely agree. Also, with the eye contact, you had good eye contact when you were looking at us, but I noticed occasionally you were looking behind us and looking more at the top of the ceiling. It's not too bad, it was just getting noticeable towards the end of your speech. Anything else Mr. Isley can improve on? All in all, I think you did a very good job.
Absolutely.
Great context behind your speech, and a very good job. So, good job.
Thank you.